I never thought I'd sell myself until I was hungry and homeless. I'm Aurora, a 28-year-old from Seattle, facing eviction in October 2024 when my landlord, Mr. Thorne, offered a chilling deal to settle my unpaid rent. I said yes, but what I discovered shocked me. I enjoyed it more than I expected. That moment led me down a dangerous path, one I never imagined I'd take, until it all unraveled publicly. This is my raw story of betrayal, self-discovery, and finding a way back. What would you do if desperation pushed you to your limits? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. The silence in my tiny Seattle apartment wasn't just quiet. It was a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me with every breath I took. It was October 2024, and I'd been drowning in debt for months. 3 months of unpaid rent, to be exact. My options had vanished, one by one, like candles snuffed out in a storm. I'm Aurora, a 28-year-old who'd once had dreams bigger than this cramped, peeling space I called home. But now I was a woman on the edge, staring into an abyss I couldn't escape. I'd lost my job as a barista back in June, a casualty of a cafe that couldn't survive the latest economic dip. No one was hiring, not for the kind of work I could do anyway. I'd sent out dozens of applications online, refreshing my email every hour, but the replies never came. Keep trying, I'd tell myself, my voice hollow as I sat at my rickety desk, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. But hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. I'd sold everything I could. My grandmother's necklace, the last piece of her I had left, gone for $50 at a pawn shop. My fridge held nothing but a half-empty box of instant noodles, the kind I'd been eating for weeks, the taste of salt and despair lingering on my tongue. I'd stopped answering my phone. Too many calls from debt collectors, their voices sharp and relentless. And Mr. Thorne, my landlord, had been circling like a vulture, his knocks on my door growing more frequent, more insistent. I'd taken to avoiding him, tiptoeing past his office downstairs, my heart racing every time I heard his heavy footsteps in the hall. "He's going to evict me," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling as I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs creaking under my weight. I had no family to turn to. My parents were gone, and I'd lost touch with my only sister years ago. Friends? They drifted away when I couldn't afford to go out anymore, their invitations replaced by pitying silence. I was alone, utterly alone, with nowhere to go and no one to help me. That's when the knock came, sharp, deliberate, cutting through the silence like a blade. I flinched, my worn robe feeling like tissue paper against my skin as I clutched it tighter. It was him, Mr. Thorne, my landlord, a man whose lingering gaze always made my skin crawl. I knew what he wanted, more than just the rent I owed. I opened the door, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. Mr. Thorne stood there, his eyes performing their slow, deliberate scan, taking in every inch of me. "Aurora," he said, his voice smooth, devoid of warmth. "You are 3 months behind." I pulled the robe closer, a futile gesture against his piercing stare. "I know, Mr. Thorne," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just need a little more time." He stepped inside uninvited, and the small room seemed to shrink around his presence. "It's a regrettable situation," he murmured, his gaze unwavering. "To see a woman of your attributes struggling so." His voice was like velvet hiding steel, his words dripping with something I couldn't ignore. So beautiful, yet so seemingly helpless. A flush of heat crept up my neck, a mix of shame and fear. "I'll figure something out," I said, my voice trembling as I looked away. He let out a sigh, a calculated sound dripping with false disappointment. Time, my dear, does not settle outstanding debts. I'd exhausted every option I could think of. Grueling extra shifts at a temp job that barely paid, fruitless attempts to borrow from anyone who'd listen, even selling the few possessions I had left. "Please," I whispered, the fight nearly gone from my voice. "Just a little longer." He studied me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Or perhaps," he said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper, "there's an alternative form of settlement." My stomach clenched, the unspoken now laid bare, a proposition I dreaded but always known might come. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Oh, come now, Aurora," he chided softly, his smirk deepening. "You're a woman of considerable perception." The room felt hotter, my robe offering no comfort as his words hung in the air. "No one else need ever know," he continued, his tone conspiratorial, almost gentle. "This can remain entirely between us." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I had no other doors, no other lifelines, only him and the terrible bargain he proposed. What had I become, and what choice did I really have? The air in my tiny Seattle apartment felt hotter than ever. Mr. Thorne's words hung between us like a noose. "No one else need ever know," he'd said, his voice a chilling whisper. "This can remain entirely between us." I stood there, clutching my worn robe, my heart hammering against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage with no way out. It was October 2024, and I had no other doors to open, no other lifelines to grab, only him and the terrible bargain he proposed. "What am I doing?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I looked down at my shaking hands. But desperation had a way of silencing every rational thought. It whispered in my ear, cold and relentless, "You have no choice, Aurora." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I gave a single, desolate nod. Mr. Thorne's smile deepened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "A wise decision, my dear," he said, his voice smooth with triumph. He reached out, not for any imagined payment, but for the sash of my robe. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The thin fabric felt like nothing against my skin as he tugged gently, the knot slipping loose. My robe fell open, exposing me to his gaze. I wanted to pull it back, to cover myself, to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Mr. Thorne led me toward the bedroom, his grip on my arm firm yet unhurried. The air felt thick, charged with an unspoken energy I couldn't name. His cologne, a rich, masculine scent, mingled with something deeper, something primal. It assaulted my senses as we crossed the threshold. He didn't waste time. Standing near the edge of the bed, he deliberately undid his belt. The soft clink of the metal buckle echoed in the suffocating silence. "I trust you understand what is expected of you, Aurora," he said, his voice steady, expectant. A lump of ice formed in my throat. I hesitated, my fingers tightening into fists at my sides. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "There's no need for such surprise," he murmured, his tone almost mocking. "An agreement is an agreement." A strange, nervous heat began to uncoil deep within me. I swallowed hard, my mind screaming at me to stop. "This is wrong," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible. But my body moved as if in a trance. I lowered myself to my knees, the cold floor biting into my skin. His fingers threaded through my hair, a subtle, guiding pressure. I leaned forward, my breath shaky, my heart pounding. The warmth of him, the sense of him, overwhelming. With a hesitant motion, I pressed my lips against him. He exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening slightly in my hair. The low sounds he made sent an unexpected thrill coursing through me. I shouldn't feel this, I thought, my mind reeling with shame. But I did. His breathing deepened, his posture tensing as I found a rhythm. A strange, fleeting sense of control flickered within my confusion. I was the one making him react, making him lose himself. Just as I settled into the moment, he pulled away abruptly. His breathing was ragged, his composure visibly strained. "Get on top," he rasped, his voice thick with need. I obeyed, rising and moving onto the bed. My robe fell away completely as I straddled him. His hands found my thighs, sliding up my skin, squeezing as if to memorize every curve. "That's it," he murmured, his eyes dark and intense, locked on mine. I reached down, aligning myself, a sharp gasp escaping my lips as I sank onto him. He groaned, his fingers pressing into my hips. "You feel better than I ever imagined," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I tried to ignore the warmth spreading through me at his words. "This is just a deal," I told myself, my breath hitching as I moved. Nothing more. But my body betrayed me. A deep pulse of pleasure rippled through me with every motion. I bit my lip, struggling to keep my face a mask of neutrality. Inside, a slow, insistent heat coiled, growing with each movement. "Go on, Aurora," he urged, his voice strained, his grip guiding me. "Move as if you mean it." I did as he commanded, my pace quickening. My breathing became shallow, uneven, the sensation overwhelming. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he murmured, his smirk deepening as he watched me. "No," I lied, my voice breaking as a wave of pleasure hit me. But he saw through me, his eyes drinking in every reaction. My flesh was a traitor, responding with an eagerness that horrified me. I clenched my jaw, desperate to hold back the truth. But inside, I couldn't deny it. I was enjoying this more than I ever should have. His breath hitched, his body tensing beneath me. With a final, shuddering exhalation, his hands locked me in place. He reached his peak, and I followed seconds later. My body trembled, the intensity catching me off guard. I swallowed my moans, keeping my expression unreadable. I collapsed onto him, my body still humming with the aftershock. For a moment, we lay there, our breathing heavy, skin damp and warm. Then I moved off him, sitting at the edge of the bed. I didn't speak. There was nothing to say. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had enjoyed every second of it, and so had he. "You surprised me, Aurora," he said, his voice smooth again, amused. "I didn't expect you to enjoy yourself quite that much." A flicker of heat stirred in my stomach. I ignored it, pulling my robe around me. "It was just a deal," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled, a low, knowing sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Certainly," he said, his smirk deepening, "if that's what you need to believe." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I should have felt consumed by shame, but I didn't, not entirely. A part of me had undeniably liked it more than I wanted to admit. "What have I become?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I stared at the floor. And what would I do next? The choice I'd made with Mr. Thorne lingered in my mind like a shadow. It followed me everywhere, a constant reminder of the line I'd crossed. I'd enjoyed it more than I ever should have. That realization haunted me, a bitter truth I couldn't shake. "What am I becoming?" I whispered, staring at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. It was late October 2024, and my tiny Seattle apartment felt more like a cage than ever. Mr. Thorne's words echoed in my ears, his voice smooth and calculating. "I have another proposition for you," he'd said that night after our first encounter. "You could turn this aptitude into something lucrative." I'd stiffened, my breath catching in my throat. "You're joking," I'd replied, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Not in the slightest," he'd said, his smirk widening. "You enjoyed it. I know you did." He was right, and I hated that he was. "There are men," he'd continued, his tone almost casual, "discerning men who'd pay good money for a woman like you." My pulse hammered in my ears, a mix of fear and something darker. One night, 2 men, he'd made it sound so simple. "How much?" I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. "More than you've made in a single night in your entire life," he'd replied, his eyes gleaming with promise. I should have said no. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I lifted my chin, my hands trembling at my sides. "All right," I'd said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Mr. Thorne had grinned, reaching for his phone. "Good girl," he'd murmured. "I'll make the call." The next evening, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing a new dress over my hips. It was tight, low cut, revealing just enough, a deep red that made my pale skin look almost luminous. Mr. Thorne had picked it out himself, along with a pair of heels that made my legs look longer than I remembered. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My hands trembled as I adjusted my hair, the dark strands falling in soft waves. "Why am I nervous?" I whispered, my voice shaky as I met my own gaze in the mirror. I'd already made my choice. There was no turning back now. "You look perfect," Mr. Thorne murmured from the doorway, his eyes roaming over me. Slow, approving, like a predator sizing up its prey. "They'll love you," he added, his smirk deepening. I swallowed hard, exhaling through my nose. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Friends," he replied, his tone casual. "Generous ones. You give them a good night, Aurora, and you'll never worry about rent again." A knock at the door interrupted us, sharp and insistent. My breath caught, my heart pounding, thump, 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 as I turned toward the sound. "They're here," I whispered, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. Mr. Thorne's smirk deepened, his voice low and amused. "Showtime, sweetheart." I opened the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. 2 men stood there, their eyes dark, expressions unreadable. They were here for me. The taller one, broad-shouldered and confident, stepped forward first. His touch landed at my waist, firm and deliberate, his fingertips pressing lightly against my skin. The other, leaner, with sharp eyes and a quiet intensity, lingered just behind. His breath was warm against the back of my shoulder, sending an unexpected ripple down my spine. I led them into the room, my heels tapping softly against the floor. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken tension. They followed closely, their presence surrounding me, 2 sets of eyes fixed on me alone. I'd agreed to this. A part of me, strangely, wanted this. But something inside me twisted, a flicker of hesitation, a spark of excitement. "Let's take care of this," the taller man murmured, his fingers brushing over the strap of my dress. He teased at the fabric, his gaze meeting mine, steady and unyielding. I exhaled slowly, my body tensing as the moment stretched. Layers slipped away, the fabric falling with ease. Their hands followed, exploring, learning, appreciating as the cool air kissed my skin. A slow heat curled through me, something both exhilarating and dangerous. I reached forward, my fingertips tracing the firm lines beneath their clothes. My touch was tentative at first, testing their response. Their breathing deepened, muscles shifting as I explored. A quiet sound escaped the taller man, a deep notes of appreciation. He tilted my chin upward, his gaze locking onto mine. "Just like that," he murmured, his voice smooth, edged with something darker. The leaner man watched, his sharp eyes absorbing every moment. His fingers brushed the curve of my jaw, a silent encouragement. I moved with careful intention, my pace deliberate, drawing out each reaction. Their combined presence, the quiet sounds they made, sent a deep warmth spreading through me. "That's it," one of them murmured, his voice thick with satisfaction. The words sent another rush through me, a forbidden thrill I couldn't ignore. "What am I getting myself into?" I whispered to myself, my voice trembling as I continued. But the shame was drowned out by something else, a sense of power, of control. I was the one they wanted, the one they couldn't look away from. That feeling, it was intoxicating, more than I'd ever expected. They let me move at my own pace, letting me lose myself in the moment. But just as I found a rhythm, a familiar voice cut through the haze. "Aurora?" I froze, my blood turning to ice as I turned toward the door. It was Claire, my old coworker from the cafe, the one I'd shared countless shifts with. She stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock, her face a mask of disbelief. She'd come to drop off a package I'd forgotten at the cafe months ago, but now she'd seen everything. What are you doing?" she stammered, her voice trembling with a mix of horror and anger. My heart stopped, panic surging through me as I scrambled to cover myself. "Claire, wait," I started, my voice breaking as I reached for my robe. But she was already backing away, her phone in her hand, her expression one of betrayal. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice shaking as she turned and fled. I stood there, my hands trembling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The men exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable as they stepped back. Mr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "This could be a problem," he murmured, his voice low and tense. I sank onto the bed, my robe clutched tightly around me, my mind racing with fear and shame. "What have I done?" I whispered, my voice trembling as the reality of what I'd become crashed over me. And what would happen now? The moment Claire's voice cut through the haze of that October night in 2024, everything I'd built or destroyed came crashing down. "Aurora?" she'd said, her voice trembling with shock, her eyes wide as she stood in the doorway of my Seattle apartment. I froze, my blood turning to ice, my hands scrambling to pull my robe around me. Claire, my old coworker from the cafe, someone I'd shared countless shifts and secrets with, stared at me in horror. She'd come to drop off a package I'd forgotten months ago, but now she'd seen me, seen this. The two men I'd been with stepped back, their expressions unreadable, the air thick with tension. Mr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. "This could be a problem," he murmured, his voice low and tense. I stood there, my heart pounding, thump, 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 my breath coming in shallow gasps. "Claire, wait," I started, my voice breaking as I reached for her. But she was already backing away, her phone in her hand, her face a mask of betrayal. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice shaking as she turned and fled down the hall. I sank onto the bed, my hands trembling, my robe clutched tightly around me. "What have I done?" I whispered, my voice barely audible as the reality hit me. The men left without a word, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. Mr. Thorne lingered, his eyes narrowing as he watched me. "You'll need to be more careful," he said, his tone cold, calculating. But I barely heard him, my mind racing with fear and shame. By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. Claire had told everyone, our old co-workers, mutual friends, even posting about it on social media. "Did you hear about Aurora?" her post read, her words sharp and cutting. "She's not who we thought she was." The comments poured in, each one a dagger to my heart. "I can't believe she'd stoop so low," one wrote. "She's disgusting," another added, their words a public condemnation. I sat on my bed, scrolling through the posts, my hands trembling as tears streamed down my face. "How did it come to this?" I whispered, my voice breaking as I buried my face in my hands. But the fallout didn't stop there. It was November 2024, and I'd agreed to another meeting at a boutique hotel downtown, a place Mr. Thorne had chosen for its discretion. The lobby was elegant, marble floors, soft jazz playing in the background, dim lights casting a warm glow over velvet chairs. I stood near the bar, my new red dress clinging to my curves, my heels clicking against the floor as I waited for the next clients. The air was thick with tension, the scent of expensive cologne and champagne lingering around me. I felt their eyes before I saw them. Two new men, their gazes heavy, expectant. But then I heard a gasp from across the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Aurora?" I turned, my heart stopping as I saw her. Lydia, another former coworker, standing near the entrance with a group of friends. She'd been my closest friend at the cafe, the one I'd confided in during my darkest days. Now, her eyes were wide with shock, her face pale as she stared at me, her friends whispering behind her. What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Her gaze darted to the men beside me, then back to me, realization dawning in her eyes. "Lydia, I started, my voice breaking as I took a step toward her. But panic surged through me, my legs moving before I could think. I turned and ran, my heels slipping on the marble floor as I darted toward the stairwell. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding as I pushed through the door. The stairwell was dark, the echo of my footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. I stumbled down a flight, my hands shaking as I gripped the railing, tears blurring my vision. "I can't do this," I whispered, my voice trembling as I sank onto the steps. But I knew I couldn't run forever. I had to face this, face her, face myself. I stood, wiping my tears, my hands trembling as I adjusted my dress. I walked back to the lobby, my heels clicking softly, my heart still racing. Lydia was still there, her friends gone, her arms crossed as she stared at me with a mix of anger and pity. "How could you do this, Aurora?" she asked, her voice low, her eyes filled with betrayal. "I thought you were better than this." Her words cut deeper than any knife, each one a reminder of the woman I'd once been. "I didn't have a choice," I said, my voice breaking as I looked at her, tears streaming down my face. "I was desperate. I had nothing left." But she shook her head, her expression hardening as she pulled out her phone. "I can't keep this quiet," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "People need to know what you've become." She walked away, her fingers already typing, the news spreading faster than I could stop it. By the next day, the story had reached beyond my circle. Local gossip blogs picked it up, painting me as a fallen woman, a cautionary tale. "Seattle woman sinks to new low to pay rent," one headline read, the words a public shaming I couldn't escape. But the fallout wasn't just mine to bear. Mr. Thorne's name surfaced in the rumors, his reputation as a landlord tainted by whispers of coercion. Tenants came forward, sharing their own stories of his manipulative tactics, threats of eviction, predatory offers. By mid-November, he faced a formal investigation, his name dragged through the mud as the community turned against him. "He deserves it," I whispered, reading the news on my phone, my hands trembling as I sat in my apartment. But the shame I felt for myself was heavier than any justice served to him. I'd lost everything, my dignity, my friends, my sense of self. "How did I let it get this far?" I murmured, my voice breaking as I looked around the empty room. The walls seemed to close in, the silence suffocating me once more. I knew I had to stop, to find a way out of this darkness. But the path ahead felt impossible, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. What had I become? And could I ever find my way back? The public exposure in November 2024 had stripped me bare in ways I never thought possible. Lydia's words, her disgust, the viral spread of my shame, it was a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. I'd hit rock bottom, my life a wreckage of choices I barely recognized as my own. "How did I let this happen?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I sat in my Seattle apartment. The silence was heavier than ever, a suffocating reminder of the woman I'd become. I knew I had to stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending this was okay. "I can't keep doing this," I murmured, my hands shaking as I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were hollow, my face pale, a stranger staring back at me. I reached for the scissors, my fingers trembling as I lifted a strand of my dark hair. Snip, the sound was sharp, final, a declaration of change as the strands fell to the floor. I kept cutting, shorter and shorter, until my hair barely brushed my shoulders. A new look, a new start. I needed to see someone different in the mirror. "I'm done," I whispered, my voice steady for the first time in months. I couldn't erase the past, but I could choose to stop letting it define me. The shame was a weight I carried everywhere, a constant reminder of the nights with Mr. Thorne, the clients, the moments I'd felt both powerful and broken. "I have lost something?" I asked myself, my voice breaking as I sat at my desk, a blank journal open in front of me. "I'm sorry, Aurora," I wrote to myself, apologizing for the choices I'd made, for the woman I'd let myself become. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink, but I kept writing, pouring out the guilt, the pain, the regret. "I was desperate," I wrote, my voice trembling as I spoke the words aloud. "But I should have been stronger." I closed the journal, my hands steady now, a small act of forgiveness for myself. I needed more than words. I needed to heal, to find a way back to the woman I'd been before. I thought of the days before the desperation, before the rent notices piled up. I remembered the summer of 2023, laughing with Claire at the cafe, the sun warm on my face as we shared iced coffees on our break. We dreamed of traveling together, of saving up for a trip to Paris, giggling over the idea of eating croissants by the Eiffel Tower. "I was happy then," I whispered, my voice soft as I closed my eyes, the memory a bittersweet ache. But that happiness had slipped away, replaced by the cold reality of survival. I knew I couldn't go back, but I could move forward. I had to. I found a support group online, a small community of women who'd faced their own struggles, their own betrayals. The first meeting was in early December 2024, held in a cozy community center in downtown Seattle. The room smelt of coffee and cinnamon, the soft hum of voices filling the space as I sat in a circle of strangers. "I'm Aurora," I said, my voice trembling as I introduced myself, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I made choices I'm not proud of." The women listened, their eyes kind, their nods encouraging as I shared my story. I thought I had to do it to survive, I continued, my voice breaking as I wiped away a tear. But it cost me everything, my dignity, my friends, my sense of self. You are here now, she said, her grip warm and steady. You're here now, she said, her voice gentle, her eyes filled with understanding. That's the first step. The group became my lifeline, a place where I could be honest, where I wasn't judged for the mistakes I'd made. Each meeting peeled back another layer of shame, replacing it with a quiet strength I hadn't felt in months. I can do this, I whispered one night, standing in front of my mirror, my new short hair framing my face. I looked different, stronger somehow. I started looking for work again, this time with a renewed determination. I applied to every job I could find, barista positions, retail, even cleaning jobs, anything to start over. In mid-December, I landed a part-time gig at a small bookstore downtown, the kind of place I'd always loved as a kid. The smell of old books, the soft rustle of pages, it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could rebuild. My first paycheck was small, but it was mine, earned through honest work. I'm starting over, I murmured, my voice steady as I deposited the money into my account. I used it to pay off a portion of my overdue rent, negotiating with the new landlord who'd taken over after Mr. Thorne's investigation. The investigation into Mr. Thorne had gained traction. Tenants had come forward, their stories mirroring mine, painting a picture of a man who'd preyed on desperation. He'd lost everything, his properties, his reputation, his freedom, as the police built a case against him. Justice, I whispered, reading the news on my phone, my hands trembling with a mix of relief and sorrow. But justice for him didn't erase the scars I carried. Can I start over? I asked myself, my voice trembling as I sat on my bed, the journal open in my lap. I wrote the answer in careful, deliberate letters. Yes. I'd lost so much, my innocence, my pride, my past. But in that loss, I'd found something new, a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't the same Aurora I'd been before. I was someone new, someone who'd survived the worst and was ready to rebuild. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I could do this. I would do this. In January 2025, I stood on the edge of a new life in Portland. The crisp morning air brushed against my face as I looked out over the city. I'm Aurora, a 28-year-old who'd survived a storm I never thought I'd escape. Months ago, in October 2024, I'd been a desperate woman in Seattle. Pushed to my limits by unpaid rent, I'd made a deal with my landlord, Mr. Thorne. A deal that led me down a dangerous path I never expected. I'd felt shame, power, and a twisted thrill I couldn't deny. But when my choices became public, the fallout nearly broke me. Mr. Thorne faced his own reckoning. His investigation had ended in charges. He'd lost everything, his name a stain in the community he'd once controlled. I'd lost too. My dignity, my friends, my sense of self. But in that loss, I found a new beginning. I'd moved to Portland, leaving behind the ghosts of Seattle. The support group I joined had become my anchor, their stories a mirror to my own. I started working at a bookstore, the quiet rhythm of shelving books a balm to my soul. But I wanted to do more, to give back, to help others like me. I began volunteering with a local women's shelter, organizing workshops for those facing hardship. It felt right, like a piece of myself I'd lost was coming back. One evening, I stood before a small group at the shelter, my voice steady. My short hair framed my face, my eyes bright with a confidence I'd fought to reclaim. I hit rock bottom, I said, my gaze meeting theirs, my heart open. I made choices I'm not proud of, but I survived. The women nodded, their faces reflecting their own struggles, their own strength. I learned that I'm more than my mistakes, I continued, my voice soft but firm. And so are you. I paused, turning to face the camera, my eyes steady, my heart full. If you've ever been pushed to your breaking point, you're not alone. I took a breath, the words a promise, a lifeline to anyone listening. You can find your way back, just like I did. I'd come so far from the woman who'd sold herself to survive. I'd found my worth, my voice, my purpose. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led me here, to a place of hope. What would you do if you had to rebuild from nothing? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below.